Hey, all of you, every one of you. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to another episode of Jeff Has Cool Friends. I'm Jeff May, and I have cool friends. It's a very accurate title. I'm very excited to have my guest with me, a very, very cool and good friend of mine, one of my favorite people on the planet, voice actor and incredible talent, Aaron LaPlante. Aaron, how you doing, bud?
Hi. What a great introduction. Thank you so much. How's it going?
It would have been so much better if I didn't kick the wire out of my mic while I was introducing it, but that's okay.
I'm watching you here, and the grace is amazing. You just went right back into it.
You know what? That's why I make the little bucks. That's why that's why what's happening, baby. I'm doing it, baby. So, Aaron, you and I met actually through another guest of the show. We met through Dana Gould.
That's right. Yeah, it was at I believe it was at that Plan 9 from Outer Space reading. I think
it was either at Plan 9 from Outer Space or I don't know if you had gone to the show that he did at Flappers, where Valerie.
I didn't go to that one.
Okay,
no,
then it would have been the Plan 9 thing, and then we became really, really good buds, and it's fun. It's fascinating. Like I somehow didn't know you, and now I see you all the time.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, it's funny. It's interesting too about in this day and age where we'll run into each other out and about, but then also if you run into somebody and you like them enough, then you start following them on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and then suddenly they become a part of your sort of daily routine if you are the type of person to check that stuff every day, and you kind of feel like you start to know somebody more. And then with you, I feel like it was like I thought I knew you, and then I ran into you again, and I was like, well, I kind of don't. So let me get to know you. And then, of course, COVID happened. And so now we're all sort of like re-entering. And for me, I find that I'm like really trying to re-enter and realize that I never was really there to begin with.
You know, it is interesting because we've bumped into each other in very specific areas of life where our interests are aligned in a very specific way. And a good example for that is I've bumped into you in at two conventions recently. One, PowerCon, which is a He-Man convention.
I was there by myself.
And two, DesignerCon, which is like an independent artists convention.
Also there, I'm always the weird alone guy whenever you see me.
I'll usually when you go to like something like a PowerCon, did you look for anybody to come with you? And everyone's like, this sounds terrible.
I don't. I mean, like my girlfriend's a really good sport about, like, she obviously is not completely on the other side of my interests, but she's not really like completely invested in them. She likes that I like them just for my sake, but sometimes they're like, I took her to Monster Palooza one time and she had a terrific time, but she was kind of like, I'm good for a little bit. Like, I don't need to go, I don't need to go back. And I think DesignerCon, I think that one is so open-ended and there's such a variety that I think almost anyone would get a kick out of that.
DesignerCon is one of those conventions that I always tell people that they shouldn't miss.
Yeah.
Because it also, I think it broadens your artistic horizons a bit of like what you consider to be good, or a lot of people are very mainstream in the things that they like. It's like with like comic artists, they're like, I like Jim Lee or blah, blah, blah. And then when you start getting to these weirder, more esoteric, more risk-taking artists.
And when you start to see, there's also just that sort of anytime you can be exposed to the DIY nature of things, then it inspires you to kind of do your own DIY, whatever that may be. I mean, going and seeing all the creativity that these people just kind of that come up with seemingly out of nowhere. And then I go off and I've been starting to kind of like put together myself things that I do again, just being like, oh, I should do what I do, as opposed to like think I don't have anything on any kind of like creativity. Just be like, I actually do. It's all right here on my desk.
It's that's fascinating because you do have a project that I did want to address. And what it specifically was, and I wasn't going to get into this until way later in the episode. We haven't even talked about the projects that you've worked on. But there's this art project that you have started doing within the past few years where you obtain animation cells, and specifically the ones I'm thinking of are from the real Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And you lay out those animation cells over appropriate images from horror films.
Yeah, particularly. Yeah. And what it is what happened was I was, Frank and Son collectible show. Anybody that hasn't, I'm sure you've talked about it on this podcast before.
Frank and Sons has been brought up. The irony is I've never had time to go.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's
Yeah,
something we should go do then. If we ever
absolutely.
get a chance. But yeah, so great collectible show out in the valley. It's out in City of Industry area, and they have all these amazing booths. And there was this guy that had a bunch of animation cells, and I kind of grew up a very early sort of fetishizing animation cells on the walls of the Warner Brothers store when they were like $500. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like thinking that was, you could physically hold a frame of your favorite cartoon. So when I came upon this guy, he had 30, 40, $50 cells, and they were from like He-Man and the Ghostbusters, and it just kind of blew my mind. So I bought a couple from him, but at the time I couldn't afford shit, so I only bought a few, and then he disappeared. I didn't see him for years, and then finally years later I got in contact with him again. It was like, do you have a bunch of cells still? And apparently he had this huge warehouse down in Orange County. So once a week.
Oh, is he the Animation Inc. archive guy?
Yes, Animation Inc. archive.
I bought a bunch of stuff from him at PowerCon in like 2017 or 2018.
Yeah, he's not doing it anymore. He sold all of his animation cells to another company out of, I think, Salt Lake, and they were actually at DesignerCon. I went up to their booth and saw a bunch of their cells.
Aaron, they were right across from the booth that I was working at. Tweet ahead.
Oh, really? Really?
Very funny. There's a very funny story about how when we were setting up our booth, they were setting up theirs. And my very, very talented friend and kind of boss, Dave Igo, who's like the creative director of Tweeterhead. He used to work for Sideshow.
I met him. Yeah, he's great.
Oh, yeah, you've met him a bunch of times, I think. Yeah. So Dave was so entranced by, because they not only have animation cells, but they have the paintings. Like the background paintings, and there was a Pirates of Darkwater one they had, and like that's a pretty obscure cartoon, all things considered. I recognize that they had a Marvel comic and that they were on for a couple seasons, but not a lot of people really remember it. And they had a painting there, and it was expensive because it's a background painting, and he was so like into it that he was like, okay, I want it, I want this so bad. And he's like, I'll give you money down, I'll pay. And afterwards I said, Dave, did you know that they weren't going to sell that and you could have talked them down a little bit? And he's like, what? Yeah. And I'm just like, dude, the con hasn't even started yet and you paid full price for this thing. Yeah, and I was razzing him the whole time, but he got this piece that he's always wanted, which was like,
it was one of those moments, that time when I used to go down there, because I'd go down there like once a week, and I'd basically just have a folder, and I'd go through this warehouse, spend the whole day going through this warehouse, open up boxes and finding these gems that the guy didn't even know he had, and like bringing them back into his office and being like, did you know you had this? Did you know you had that? And so over the time I started collecting them, and there was this one box of Ghostbusters cells that seemed to be the less desirable ones because all their backs were turned and they were looking at something, and generally you want to see the whole character, certainly their face. So I took one of those, and I was kind of like, this could, what could he be looking at? And then it just popped into my head that the girl standing at the end of the hall in The Shining, the twins. So I screenshot it. It was on that, The Shining was on Netflix at the time. So I just screenshot on my computer, printed out an 8x10 of that image and put it together. And it was like, holy shit, this is amazing. So I went back and I was like, hey, can I get, so then he sold them to me at a pretty good price because they were less desirable. And I started gobbling those up. But then I found a bunch of He-Man cells where the characters were walking in profile. They
did that a lot. I have one of those actually, one that I bought from him specifically because it had cloth. It was the Evil Warriors, and Clawful was in there. I'm a big Clawful fan, so
of course, yeah. Well, so I put that together with Abbey Road, and it just worked perfectly. I put them on the crosswalk and then walking across, and then I found different sizes, and then I found a bunch of Captain Planet and the Planeteers ones. So it was a bunch of cells of the Planeteers looking distressed, so that I just paired those up with like scenes of extreme pollution and garbage on the beach and stuff like that. And it turned out pretty fun, but then that sort of dried up. He moved to Vegas, he sold the collection. So I built up a little archive for myself. So that's what I meant before, where I've got them here in this box and they just kind of sit there. And every now and again, I feel inspired to go and start putting them together again. If anything, because maybe someday I'll have a table at one of those things. And, people might.
Honestly, like that would be such a cool booth for you to have, is to sell those. Because here's the thing. I thought about, like, I was wondering like what you did. And I'm glad you told me how you got those cells, because those things are everywhere. like everybody I know somehow has one of your like you have infected the Burbank area of like, I went into Dark Delicacies and I saw one there. Like I see your work all the time.
Oh, but it's fun. Well, because that's the thing. What I started to do with them, it was almost this way of, because I have a hard time I know the networking, you know what I mean? Like, or wrapping my mind around what that means in terms of just like, not so much like getting a lot of contacts, but making interesting people aware of my existence and vice versa. And one of the ways to do that, Forrest Ackerman, you've probably talked about him before. Forrest J. Ackerman, the publisher of Famous Monsters of Filmland. And
I've never talked about him on the show before.
Okay. So, obviously, sort of the lightning rod of inspiration for an entire generation of monster kids. And I was listening to another podcast where they were telling stories about him. And one guy said, the first time I met him, he reached into his pocket and he pulled out this really neat little pin and he gave it to me. And it struck me as like the first time I ever met Forrest J. Ackerman, he gave me something. And that really rung in my head, like the people that I want to be around or know, I want to give them something, you know what I mean? So they can see this cool thing and then maybe think about me. So sometimes when I work in voiceover, I'll bring one, or like people just all these like Mystic Museum and places, I'll drop them off there. And it's kind of this,
I saw one there too.
Like spreading the love a little bit. And that's, and I don't know, I hate to describe it as if I'm like trying to do something with it, but I guess I am trying to do something with it. It's like spreading the love, I love the fact that you just told me that you see them all around.
It is an interesting calling card. Where I'm just fun. Like, I have one of those, like, it's like one of those great things where it's like, oh, I love that. Are you is gift giving like your love language? Is that?
I think it is. And I think, what's interesting too, is that, and I know for sure you feel this, is that we have these interests when we're younger. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes we feel, because we're in our own little bubbles, or maybe we're from like a particularly rural area where we think that it's only for us.
Very insulated.
Then we get out in the world and then we start to meet other people. And then it becomes this beautiful, like secret handshake. We're like, you saw that movie? I saw that movie. Oh, you like that cartoon? I like that cartoon. And so it's funny, like after a while, I used to only think about like career stuff, but I feel like now I'm starting to like hopefully everybody tries to find sort of like a higher meaning, and sharing in nostalgia and kind of spreading the love that way. I feel like that just might be my higher meaning right now.
I do. I love that. I love that a lot, actually. That is something because
you can relate, I'm sure.
I sure do. And I'm a gift giver. It's like, I love doing it. And it kind of infuriates the people in my life, because it feels like, I feel like they think they have to like compete. Like I hear that all the time, with people I date or whatever. They're just like, well, that's not fair. Like,
well, it's a perfect example of this. You mentioned Dana before, and the reason
Dana Gould,
at all, Dana Gould, is that I used to listen to his podcast. I still do, of course, but I didn't know him. We knew some people, but I listened to his podcast a lot, and I was listening to it during a time that was particularly difficult for me, kind of lonely, and so I was listening to it all the time. And frankly, like him and the people that he had on there, it sort of gave me something to shoot for. I could sort of look up to them, you know what I mean? Like, because they were just this wave of comedians that were like being cool, and they weren't interested in getting up or being to women, or you know what I mean? They were just like sincerely trying to like.
Sometimes we're just nerds, man.
So you know what I mean? So I looked up to that, and I heard a story on there where he said that his mom had made him a werewolf mask when he was a kid out of a blank mask and some like fur that she cut off her fur coat and glued it on there. And I was so touched by that, because it reminded me of my parents sort of improvising Halloween costumes for me back then. Mm-hmm. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool? Because he said he would give anything to have a picture of it or have it again. So I went out and I made like a facsimile of a mask with craft fur and made it kind of like a mom would have made it on the fly. And it looked so good that I actually made one of those Ben Cooper boxes, those window boxes.
I love it. Yeah.
And then I was like, and I made this thing, and then I was like, I don't even know this guy. Like, what the So I left it at Dark Delicacies thinking he would go in there sometime and pick it up. And he was signing his Planet of the Apes book. And I thought, I'm going to go get it from Dark Delicacies and bring it. But he had picked it up that day. and then we met, and it was kind of this thing where I don't know if he really knows what to think of me from now on because it was such a personal gesture that I feel like I kind of freaked him out a little bit. But
that happens. I think when you get to a certain level of celebrity, you have to be a little wary, I think, of certain fans.
Absolutely.
But also it's not hard to be able to discern the difference between somebody who is well-meaning and friendly versus somebody who's a bit overbearing.
Well, yeah. And so when you talk about like gift giving, this is actually part of it. If you have the mentality of being like that, that has kind of gone out of style a little bit. So when you do that, if it's somebody you don't know very well, there is a little period of time where they do kind of go like, is this person, are they really that considerate? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
yeah. Or am I going to be a rug? Like
yeah. Well, also too, I think too, like with me, especially with Dana, it seems like now every time I've run into him since then, I always kind of show up and I'm just kind of like, I don't know what to say. I'm here.
But I mean, I would say that that's not, but you should just, I mean, I would classify you guys as friends at this point in time. You've been around each other. Like,
yeah, for sure. I guess it's just, it's a funny thing about like, as much as I have that want to sort of share in the nostalgia or like tap into somebody else's, you know, like it's always fun when you find out about somebody else's nostalgia. And then a lot of times what I do is I fill my closet up with just a bunch of shit. And then sometimes when I'm leaving for like a birthday party or something, I'll see something in there and be like, oh man, this person would really love this. And then I get to be the guy that like shows up with the perfect present, you know?
One of the things that I absolutely love to do is I Christmas shop year round. Yeah. I see stuff for people and I'm like, this is for them. And I'll buy it in April. But sometimes it becomes overbearing because by December, I'm like, I think I may have picked up too much stuff. You're like,
or you forget who you got what for.
Yeah. Like, and it's definitely one of those situations too. It's one of the reasons why, I mean, cause you've been to Mint on Card, you've been to my stand-up show.
Yeah.
And we do raffles cause I like giving things away. I like people getting a little present. That to me, fun. There's no profit in that. The raffles is free, and it's just stuff that me and Lisa Harden, my co-producer, just kind of get together. Like we'll just go find it. Like she'll be like, "Oh, I found this great." What did she say? Oh, she found a Nintendo NES cartridge Christmas or an NES controller Christmas ornament to give away for our next show, which is in December. And I was like, I want it. And I went and bought one.
Oh,
because I was cool. Like, I do want to give it away, but I absolutely love that. I do want to kind of go back to where I should have started and I didn't, which is your work. Because you have a fascinating history in that I was looking up your IMDb. And something that I noticed, aside from the fact that you have some very an interesting pedigree, is that it doesn't necessarily go back too far. You've been an actor, you've been in some things, but it's really, really picked up in the past few years.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's one of those deals where I came down here from Seattle, and I was in the theater in Seattle for about 4 years or something. And I moved down here, and then it was kind of the thing where you move down and I don't know anybody and was never one to like hit the ground running with like headshots and all that. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it took me forever to get an agent and forever to really get any proper, I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing. So it took a while. And when I first got down here, it was about, the idea of moving from one city and setting up shop in another seemed so foreign to me because I didn't really have too many family members that had done that either. So I got here and it took me a lot of years to really get out at all, but I was working as a tour guide at Warner Brothers Studios. And when I was in there, yucking it up in the break room with some of the other tour guides, some of them had come from Chicago and they were starting a sketch group with their friends. And so they let me join in. And then we started a sketch team at IO in Hollywood. And when we started doing those shows, if you're doing a half-hour comedy show and you're playing like 5 or 6 different characters, of course you have quick costume changes. But one of the best ways to differentiate between the characters in real time in front of an audience is to give them a distinct sounding voice. Mm-hmm. Because it changes the whole character, obviously the physicality as well. So I sort of leaned into that a little bit, modulating my voice. It's kind of always been a thing with me ever since I was a little kid. And so I sort of became known for doing that. And then that got certain people around me who maybe knew casting directors or whatever to be like, well, you should meet my friend Aaron. So I met a voiceover casting director, a really, really notable one named Mary Hidalgo. And we were supposed to have a 10-minute meeting, and it wound up being like 3 hours. We just talked about everything under the sun. And so then she said, well, if I don't have anything for you, but if I do in the future or whatever. And it was months that went by. And then finally she called me and said they were doing a Popeye movie at Sony, and they needed somebody to do the pre-production scratch track recording that would ultimately be thrown out in favor of a famous person.
Yeah. Was it for Bluto?
It was Bluto, yeah. So I did Bluto.
That was a hard guess for me to figure out that you would have played Bluto.
Yeah. Well, it was, yeah. Well, the thing is, when I first heard it, there's two major Bluto voices. One of them is a little bit harsh like this. It's kind of a deeper version of Popeye. And then one of them is in the back of the throat. So then I just put the two of them together. You know what I mean? And that became and he sort of talks out of the side of his mouth like this. And that became the voice. And I did that for like 2 years or something, helping out with that. And that was what sort of led me into the world of voiceover. So yeah, it took me, I'm definitely a late bloomer in almost all aspects of my life. And my career is still blooming.
To be fair, you do have some great live action credits, lest we forget KKK Santa.
Oh boy, that one. That one. And it's funny, that one may as well have just been a voiceover because I had a clan hood on in that one. And that was for that Adam.
It's from Adam Ruins Everything, who Adam has done Mint on Card.
He's done great. That show. He was so nice to me. I didn't get a chance to, of course, he's at the helm of everything.
Just
he was
the nicest guy.
Legit, yeah. So and he also was very sensitive to the fact that it was really just a quick joke, but they put me in this clan robe at the beginning of the day, and I was just sitting there by craft service in a fucking clan robe. And I finally went over and just said, "Can I take this off until we're ready?" And they're like, "Yeah. Go ahead." So,
please, as a matter of fact, like
all it was just it was like a quick thing. They said like Santa Claus showed up in many events, even a KKK rally, and then a guy comes in and goes, "I'm dreaming of a white Christmas," and then that's it. And really, it was more so just the voice, if anything, and I guess my imposing size.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it works. And plus you're a voice guy. You can work that. You're a big dude. So, you found yourself in like some Digimon pieces. I would say that the piece I think that really starts to move you forward, in my opinion, when I look through here, is that you did get pulled onto Samurai Jack when they did the continuation.
Yeah. That you're absolutely right about that. Cause I was doing all the scratch track stuff. And then, sometimes you start doing something and then of course people ask you about it. So then you start to kind of like tell the story of what you're doing to your inner circle. And then that goes off and suddenly people become aware of you as one thing or the other. And so when I was doing these scratch tracks, they would never see the light of day. I would get paid for them, which was great. But I mean, I never actually ended up in any of the movies. But as I was talking about it, certain people in my life would start to know me as maybe a voiceover guy. And so my friend Ryan became an engineer at a place called Studiopolis that does a lot of anime. And he was constantly pitching me over there. But they were like, we don't know him. So then finally they had a show that was just monster sounds. And a lot of voice actors didn't want to do that, screw up their voice. But I have a pretty strong voice. And so I started doing that. And then I started there'd be like one sentence characters and he would let me do those. And so that's how I got on a lot of those like Digimon things. But then the Samurai Jack thing came up, and that was kind of a milestone for me because I was in a movie called Movie 43. I got cut out of it, but it was, that was how I got my SAG card. But then there was that period of time where it's like, you can join SAG. All you need is $3,000. And at the time I was like, who the has $3,000? Like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
And so, it took me forever. But when Samurai Jack, when they said that I got to be on that, because I knew that Gendy, who I should say Gendy Tartakovsky was the one who was doing Popeye. That's how I met him.
Okay.
So he was doing it, and I didn't have to audition for it. It was a thing that he just want me to be on it, which was a huge lucky break, kind of terrifying because you don't know what character you're playing or whatever. You just kind of go, okay. And I went in there and I got to play like, I think four or five characters in a few episodes of that.
Yeah. And then, so that's going to lead to, I would say, like, I don't know how to say it. I wouldn't say highest profile, piece that you've done. It might be, but when you came on as what is essentially the principal actor of Primal,
Yeah, Primal.
because you know you played Spear in Primal,
Yeah.
which available on HBO Max. Check it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was, yeah, it was because after Samurai Jack, it was one of those things where, Gendy is just an absolute, he's a genius, but he's also just very, serious about his work. He comes in there, there's no pretense, there's nothing extra. All it is just we're working and we're working on something special. And so everybody's on board. But when I would leave, sometimes being an insecure actor, I would feel like I just went on a date with a girl that's really out of my league.
You know what I mean? Good for you.
So I would leave and just be like, I had fun. I think they had fun.
I hope they did.
Are they going to call me? You know what I mean? I just never knew if I was ever going to get to work with them again. But I've been lucky enough to work with Gendy on pretty much everything he's done. He'll always find a little place for me, which is just one of those like, I'm eternally grateful and really lucky. But so after Samurai Jack, there was Hotel Transylvania 2, Hotel Transylvania 3. I played the Gremlins in that. So that was kind of, that again was sort of solidifying our relationship. And then one time I just get an email from my agent and they say, Gendy wants you to show up to Cartoon Network and come in there and just kind of, he's got something that he's kind of working out and he needs you to come in. So I went in and we went into the booth and we just kind of started playing around with human versus ape sounds, kind of like a and like how human would it be versus how ape-like would it be, because they still obviously had an idea of what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So we're doing that, and he's trying to see how loud can I scream, how deeply, how loud can I scream and still maintain a deep register in my voice. And then, what if it was a more conversational sound? We just kind of working it out. And then and he showed me a little bit of a graphic of what Spear would look like. And then I just said, well, I'm down to audition. I'm down to throw in an audition. And he was like, there's no audition. You're like, I had you in mind for this.
Wow.
I just wanted to make sure you could do it. And so I was like, because he has a clear vision, but I think at the time it was kind of like, he's remembering my voice, but he's remembering it like this. You know what I mean? Like
but there is something to be said though about like, you have you visibly speaking, you have an intimidating look. You're a bulky and strong guy. You're like you're what, 6'3", 6'4"?
6'5".
Yeah, you're 6'5". Yeah, you're bigger than I am. And I, when you see that, and like it would make sense that when he was thinking of doing something that was very, pardon, but like primal, very caveman-y, like those are the proportions that you're bringing to the table. And so it must have been an easy transition for you. But I mean, this show became this like unbelievable success.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, and seeing it, the interesting thing about it is, I had no idea how it was going to be received, but I obviously never really talk about the like when I was doing it initially, obviously never said really a word but you would hear people talk, like when they started to advertise it and they say like there's no sound, and there would be people saying, man, how are they going to do that, a cartoon without dialogue? And I was like, all cartoons used to not have dialogue.
I was like, what are you talking, even the old like Bluto never had lines in the beginning.
Well, and absolutely. And also too, I think that Samurai Jack, that 5th season, Samurai Jack has always been a lot of action without any dialogue, a lot of just, almost like an old Western or something. And so they really leaned into that in the 5th season, I feel, where there would be entire sequences where there's no dialogue at all. And it was more violent, but not in a gratuitous way, in a very like,
it's an action cartoon.
It's an action cartoon. Yeah. So I guess when anytime somebody would ask me like, well, how's that going to work? And I'm like, I don't know, just watch season 5 of Samurai Jack, like that, and Gendy has said this before, so I'm not speaking out of school, but originally the idea was a little kid and a dinosaur. It was going to be like a kid show.
Oh, like Devil Dinosaur, basically.
Something like, so it was going to be a kid show, and it was kind of like, well, he had done Samurai Jack and he'd done what he wanted. He made it a little bit more sort of, it was a little bit more violent and a little bit more like a sort of like a dance, like a violent dance, really, if anything. And so I think you know, and I think he's always wanted to do something that was a little bit more adult in that sense, and also just like really heartfelt. And I mean, there's a lot of heart in everything he does,
Yeah.
but I mean, Primal's heartbreaking.
You hate to sort of say it in a way that sort of like belittles other properties and projects that have been worked on before, but it has a designer con vibe. It has a much more independent vibe to it, that it is bucking the animation systems that came before it. It is avoiding the pratfalls that a lot of animation has had before, which, as you said before, he's a genius. Of course that's going to be the case. I mean, Samurai Jack is what it is because it's a hyper stylized future samurai techno organic nightmare show. It's amazing. And then to do something like this, which is the total opposite.
Well, and it's so funny too, because at the premiere, I was just standing there like a worm, like I usually do, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be. And I saw Gendy's wife, and I run into her whenever we do thing. I always run in, and of course go over and say hi. And my girlfriend and I were standing there, and we were chatting with her, and then we just said, you know, why this? I mean, why did he do this show? Was there some kind of grand inspiration that you could sort of see? And she just kind of looked at me and went, he likes cavemen and he likes dinosaurs. I don't know.
That's the simplest answer you could possibly get to.
But it was great because that's a lot of times we see these crazy elaborate properties of these works of art, and then we think that idea must have been an elaborate eureka moment, when in fact it could have been just a simple observation, staying true to one's own likes and leaning into that and just making what, you know, I mean, some of the greatest filmmakers ever will just say, I make the movies that I liked when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's very simple.
Well, it's like George Lucas being like, I like Flash Gordon, I like Kurosawa, I mashed them together, and that's what I got. And that to me, I think is very interesting. Where it's that like, and it's also becomes like the necessity being the mother of invention, and sometimes that necessity is I want to do what I like. I want to do a project that's based entirely on the things that I like. But the other thing that people seem to forget is that dialogue free animation or art in any way, it is so much harder because you have to process what points you're getting across through a visual and non-emotive, yes, but non-verbal way of doing that.
Yeah, and it's so amazing to see how they do it. I mean, a perfect example would be sometimes when you see, like if you saw in the show, if you saw like a giant, threatening, scary Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you'll see the character, and the character will not move a muscle, only these tiny little dots, its pupils and its eyes, will dance around in its eyes and give so much expression, and the character isn't even moving or doing anything. And it's so interesting. I mean, this show, the thing about it is I'm obviously excited to be in it, proud to be in it, but one of the things that just tickles me about it is I feel like it is going to be, if it's not already, a lightning rod of inspiration for new generations of storytellers in animation. I sincerely hope, just in a selfish way, that one day, 20 years from now, I'll be watching an interview of a young man or young woman, and they will say, one of my favorite shows growing up was a show called Primal. You know what I mean? Like that sort of like pedigree of influence. I like, if anything, that's what I want to be a part of, is something that will sort of like push the inspiration forward.
It won an Emmy.
Well, that was another surprising. And it was funny that I found out about that after I saw you at PowerCon. We had a conversation. I stepped out of the thing. I wasn't looking at my phone the whole time, and I checked it, and I saw Gendy holding the Emmy, and I was like, whoa. And the thing about it is, at the Television Academy, there's always like all these sort of waves of awards. You know what I mean? Like people are like, hey, I won an Emmy. Yeah, but it's October. You know what I mean? Like there's different tiers. And so the Primal had already won, you know, there was one for like storyboards, and there was a few technical Emmys. And so when I saw him, I figured that was what it was, that they were finally giving him the technical Emmy that he had won. But the fact that it won the big one, the best anime, I couldn't believe that. It was so cool.
And deservedly so. We're going to do a shift for a second from animation to video games, which is something that you've been a part of. But the first thing first, I don't know if you know this, Aaron, but if you join my Patreon at patreon.com/JeffMay, and if you do the $10 tier, you become a producer of this show. And what that means is that I say your name out loud on episodes of Jeff Has Cool Friends, because I appreciate you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a list of names. These are my producers that I want to say an extra special thanks to. And then we're going to talk more about your dive into the world of really intense fandoms in gaming. But I would like to send a special shout out to Mike Gouts, Grumblebee, Cronenberger, Jeff Hurl's Concussive Force. There's a thing now where people like to take the JHCF, which is what I call the show, and add things in there. So that's a nice punching reference, and I like it. Farty Marty, a.k.a. Bartholomew Martinez, These 7 Bs, Lemming Malloy, Kool-Aid Molotov, Superman Family number 184. That's somebody's favorite comic. Do you have a favorite individual comic issue?
I think no, I don't. I don't know. I'm not as familiar with comics, to be honest with you. I'm sad to say.
It's okay. Show's over. No. Thank you to That Scene in Meet Joe Black where Brad Pitt dies. Godzuki, the animated child of Godzilla. Good to know. I'm the law, martial law, and I hate superheroes. Mr. Billy Beck, there were raptors in the kitchen, Phil. People died. Kimball, your Yuletide retail goblin. Get vaccinated, you chuckleheads. The 5G lets you see sound, and then you can see your friends again. Let's go. I feel like that's a bit outdated, but you should still be getting vaccinated. Shout out to Blackagar Boltagon. Shout out to Big Booty Boy 42069. Jeff hates competitive fun, you bastards. Patrick Dorr, the Digital Phil, the Bollock, Caitlin Binney, L stuck in a shipping container outside LA, Seldo, RIP to all of our stuff. The Ian McClendon, Jezbut's fiance is going to be a mom. Congratulations to Jezbut's fiance. Craft beers make my alcoholism look like a neat hobby. Hi, I'm Super Fudge, and welcome to Fudge-a-mania. Mef J, bold and brash, more like belongs in the trash. Russell from Jersey, pizza, bagels, Taylor ham. That's a fun one, right? Many thank you to You Live by the Vertigo, You Die by the Vertigo. Jeff May is never going to have a history podcast, guys. Believe me, I asked very nicely, and that's true. I'm not going to do it. I don't care if I don't get rich doing a hardcore history. I don't want to. That's work to me. Is it rude to use this bit to ask for comedian Keith Carey? By now it is, but it's fine. Cody Beck Jr. at Gavin_Not with 2 T's. Jessica Robertson, Captain Fatstrong, Gregarious Gregorio, the AV Foundry, Domo Arigato, Andrew Rabato, Gray Man of the Fireside Chronicles. Ricky Cilantro at Nerd Numbers, Mackenzie Chill, Willem Dafoe's Baffling Big Bonanza, Dan Hackroyd, Murph the Murph, show me in the rules where it says a dog can't play basketball. Russell Richardson, the Sass Stan, Sophia Hapgood, Psychic Services, The Ghost of Dave Thomas, Koi Pham, Art and Mentoring, Frankly Amish, Bart Fartigan, Jennifer Fendelander, The Most Well-Prepared Dead Guy, I Didn't Kill My Wife, Adrian, Kelly Stanaway. I would like to add that you are cradling a dog while I'm going through this, and I love
my little baby.
It is like a baby as I am watching that, and that is fantastic. Shout out to Adrian, Kelly Stanaway, Silius Ruby, Steven, Dr. DNA, Burrito Mouth, twitch.tv/Firechild460, Lisa Harden, my co-producer at Mint on Card, Huey Freeman, Taurus Bulba, Mindfreak555, Shebrew Sleeps, Norm from Cheers, Vortispin. Norm from Cheers, by the way, special shout out to him. He finds all the curse words in the shows. And then
I said the F word before.
It's fine. No, because on the Patreon we can swear. So it's just when the episodes go for free, we bleep them out. And shout out to Norm from Cheers for being my curse word eagle, I guess would be the words. Sentinel. Vortispin, Normal Man, Andrew McGuire, Jolly Buckaroo, Dill Havarti. That's my favorite cheese. What's your favorite cheese, Aaron?
I like an aged white cheddar, like an Irish cheddar.
Oh, okay. Well, that's like a sharp Irish cheddar.
That's right.
It's the most flavorful thing to ever come out of Ireland. Exploding Runes, JK, Jeff May's biggest fans, Fashisless Jones, David Knifeboot Hinson, Funky J, Saint Gutfree, Instagrams at Bob_of_skull, an action figure of Clippy. Is that a threat? No, that's a promise. C2E2 AM Adventures, an NFT of He-Man Skull Skeletor. All right. Where's Bane? Children love the meat Millie. Flesh, your friend. And finally, Poinsettia, Jingle. So shout out to all of those creative names, those regular. It's always got to be funny to start with like Mike Gouts is just a dude's name and then finish with Poinsettia, Jingle.
Like I said, I've listened to some episodes of this, and those names have just gotten so much more elaborate.
They've really amped them up. It right? Might be a problem actually. I'm just that level of being amped up where it's like, but I do love that. And again, if you want to hear your name read off like that, you can check out patreon.com/Jeff May and sign up for that $10 producer tier while it lasts. I'm not 100% sure that there's going to be enough space in there much longer. I only left options for like 100 of them, and then most of them are gone. And that even seems a bit much. I might cut that back eventually, but for now, give me that money. Daddy needs the money. Christmas is coming up. So we got the holidays on our way. Now I want to talk to you again. I want to shift to the fact that you are now a member of the Resident Evil family.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You play the Duke.
The Duke. I play the Duke.
Tell me about that.
So that was one of those things where, because we talk about like, I'm sure that some people that are listening to this want to like think about like, how do they get into voiceover, or how do they and I feel like a lot of times just in this business in general is there's things that you do and things that you get for yourself, and then there's things where you just kind of show up and you're in and around an environment, and then you little by little, like that thing I talked about where I started talking about doing voiceover, and then people in my circle kind of found out that that's what I do. And there was a girl that I knew in high school, and we knew each other a little bit after high school, but we were kind of separate because we moved to Seattle. She was going to the University of Washington, and I was just doing theater in town.
Where are you from? Where are you from?
Seattle. I'm from Lake Stevens, Washington. About an hour north.
Because I didn't know if you moved to Seattle from like Chicago or if you moved.
Yeah. I moved to Seattle from about an hour north, and so did she. But she was in school, and I was doing this other thing, and so when I moved down here, we had kept in contact, and she came down here, and she just a total random happenstance got involved. She played Marguerite Baker in Resident Evil 7, she's like one of the main villains in Resident Evil 7. And I found out about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Congratulations. I can't wait to play it. Then, a little while went by, and then she emailed me and said, so I was working on 7. And then after it was over, I sort of offered my services to be like, well, look, I could always, use a job. And so if you guys need any help behind the scenes or maybe in casting or whatever. And one of the producers said, well, we always have trouble getting, like really good actors. I mean, there's a lot of actors around, but like getting actual good ones, it can be kind of difficult sometimes. So do you know
that's like such a wonderfully shady thing to say, where it's just
it is, but
throwing shade, not shady like
no, but that is kind of the truth. I mean, most actors, what they're up against is not crazy competition from other good actors, because then it's like, whatever, you'll get it or I'll get it. The problem is it's all the actors that flood the casting directors' offices and just completely alienate themselves, make casting directors hate actors, and then you show up. I mean, it is I'm being right now, I'm sorry, but that's kind of like, I feel like that.
No, trust me, I work in this world too, and you see it. It's funny and like there's a lot of like the people that they're very squeaky wheels out there too that will
and it's also good people, just like people that are people that are because you can be like a really good actor, but there's people that I've seen it a lot where people are like a really good actor, but they're a really horrible person and they know they're horrible. So they're just like, well, at least I'm a good actor. Watch this, and so I think they really over there, because Capcom's not a huge corporation. It's a family owned company. And so it's relatively, it's not small, obviously Capcom's huge, but they really care a great deal about like getting good people to collaborate with. And Sarah, luckily she has fond thoughts of me. So she was like, I know this guy Aaron, he's a good guy and you should meet him or whatever. And so I auditioned for it, but I auditioned for a really small part, like in the very beginning of the game. And the things always sort of change, but I auditioned for this one small part. And Sarah called me the next day and she said, you didn't get it. And I was like, oh, well, that's all right. Thank you. I mean, I usually, that's whatever. I usually don't get it. And she was like, they're saving you for like a bigger part, which that's something that like you can hear sometimes, but that's very, very rare. So I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And what's interesting about the process to get involved with one of these things is that it is so secretive that you just kind of show up when they ask you to show up and just kind of do whatever they ask you to do. But most actors, that really famous text about acting, an actor prepares, is very aptly named because in my mind, that's all an actor does. Yeah. Is become aware of a predetermined situation, prepare it enough to where it doesn't sound predetermined, and then perform it. You know what I mean? So sometimes like you would get this copy, this audition copy, and it was kind of vague. You didn't know what the character was about or what, you know what I mean? And actually the copy isn't even what's going to end up in the game because they have to be so secretive about it. So
it's wild to me.
It's amazing. So for me, I was auditioning and the scene that they had written was there's a guy in the middle of battle and then another guy comes around the corner and says like, hey, do you want some advice? Like that was basically the scene. And so I did it. But when I did it, they described him as being this giant guy who has this crazy sounding voice and sort of deep. And then so my choice to when I auditioned for it, I did like kind of and they said they wanted an Eastern European accent. So I did like a Hervé Villachez with an Eastern European accent. So it sounded like this.
So that's the tattoo from when you say Hervé Villachez from Fantasy Island. Yeah, the plane guy.
Yeah, so it was like, I've been waiting for you, Mr. Winters. That was the original. And when I auditioned for the part, I got the part using that voice. So then I thought like, boy, this is a video game. And by the way, I didn't know what video game it was for the entire time I was auditioning for it. So then when I got the part, I thought, okay, I'm going to go in there and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that voice. And when I first got there, again, you don't really get a chance to see the lines and stuff. It's not like in a traditional script form. It's like sentences in an Excel spreadsheet, and they give you context before you say every line. And what's amazing is when you say the lines, that's the final performance. That's what's going to end up in the game. You know what I mean? Which is such an interesting thing to remember about voice actors is like, you go in there and sometimes you don't have like any benefit of rehearsal. There's not another actor there. You're not wearing a costume. You're not on a set. I mean, like with Primal, it's like, I have to just go from sitting there and drinking tea to then the most intense expression of emotion I have in me, and then go right back to just drinking tea and waiting for instructions and getting back into it again.
I wanted to ask about that too, real quick. And I know I don't want to keep ping ponging back between these two projects because I think they're both equally important, but two very different projects. But with the Primal thing, like what does that do? Does that wreak havoc on your vocal cords? Like to do something like that? And like, I'm assuming that the recording sessions weren't half an hour.
I get them done in about 45 minutes to an hour. And I just prepare a lot. It's almost like you're preparing yourself to injure your voice in a way, but not, I mean, there's a lot of warming up and stuff. And I'm kind of doing it. I mean, I'm watching YouTube videos and kind of learning about how to warm up your voice. I taught Fred Tatasciore. I wouldn't say we're friends, but I know him. And he's the voice of the Hulk. He's been the voice of the Hulk for years. And he does every like big, crazy, scary voice in a video game or whatever you can think of.
Yeah.
And he drinks this stuff. I actually have some right here. It's a special cough syrup that I get in Chinatown. That it's all holistic, but it's got marshmallow roots and all kinds of shit in it. So I mix that with water and it helps me out. But luckily, I only have to record Primal once every like month and a half, because usually you would do a voice and then they would animate to that voice. But with Primal, it's reversed. The animation is already completely done, and then I come and I'm the last. Like I come and record the voice, so it's like ADR. I'm watching the character do the thing, and I have to approximate his intensity.
What going back to that reaction of doing a non-verbal voice acting gig, like, is it treated the same way as having like lines, I guess? Like,
Well,
is it treated that way through like union standards?
oh
Like,
yeah,
is it,
yeah.
because I was wondering about that. Like, is it considered like sound effects as opposed to lines, or
No, yeah, I think that they luckily, I mean, yeah, they just count it as like a regular, like a regular working day, like any other voice actor would do, and which is nice, yeah, that it's not because that is something too about voice acting or any sort of work that anybody does in this business is like some work you get paid what's right, and other work you just kind of don't,
yeah,
But in this one, this is all very above board, This is very like they really they really value me, which I really, they're just really cool to me. They really value, I think, because I it's funny that you talk about maybe not everybody could do that with their voice, but I think when I first got into it, I was thinking about people like Fred standing right next to me doing it better than me, because I'm well aware that there are these incredible voice actors been doing it for a long time, and they mostly do like sounds. And Fred could do this part standing on his head, but luckily I got to do it. But as I do it a little bit more and more, I start to feel like, oh, well, maybe I am uniquely qualified for this character specifically.
exactly. Like, there are voice actors in, like, when you think about like the pantheon of voice acting, and you think about your Frank Welkers and your Oppenheimers and all these people that have been in all these properties that we've watched and that had all these skills, but they might not be great for the thing that you're great for. And I think that's a great lesson for everybody, which is we're all good at something. And that to recognize and understand that and act accordingly, I think, and to find that. Like, I was teaching for a decade before I got into stand-up, and I know there are certain things about me that I'm very good at, and I know there are certain things about me that I am terrible at. I think I'm a really good comedian. I think I'm really bad at being a comedian, if that makes sense. Like, I'm good.
My God, I'm going to steal the out of that. Like, I feel the same way.
I'm great at the skill of getting people to laugh while I'm holding a microphone and standing in front of them. I'm bad at getting seen. I'm bad at sending booking requests. I'm bad at booking my own tours. Like, I'm terrible at it.
It's interesting because that actually kind of that sort of translates back to Resident Evil a little bit, because with Resident Evil, and so what I was saying before is that I had that crazy voice. I tried to do it in the first session and then went, whoa, wait a minute. No, the voice doesn't have to be that crazy, and there's no accent now. So we just kind of came up with the voice in the room, which is another thing that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't know what this was for. You know what I mean? Like, until finally I said, what game is this for, by the way? And somebody said, Resident Evil 8, dude. Like, I think they thought I knew. And I was like, because immediately when they said Resident Evil 8, I immediately was like, I'm 12 years old. I'm in my sleeping bag. I'm at my friend's house. We're having a slumber party. I'm pissing myself with fear, but I don't want the other guys to know. We're walking down the hall. We're about to open the door. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was another one. I'm sorry.
No, you're allowed to curse.
Oh, okay.
I like to punish the people that do not join on the Patreon by making them hear the bleep.
Okay.
It's a pure punishment for people that don't want to pay me directly. Think of it as like a hostage situation.
Nice. Okay. Well, so it was, Resident Evil, and then of course all those movies and stuff. So Resident Evil is kind of a thing because,
it's mildly popular. You're right. It's slightly popular.
A lot of my work up until that point has been a lot of explaining. People go, you're a voice actor. What are you in? And then I have to really just kind of go through if they really are interested, go through the litany of anime stuff that even I'm not even familiar with. And then, talk about Primal and describe what I do. And sometimes people do go, wait, he doesn't talk. You just make the sounds. And I go, yeah, but it's hard. I mean, the sounds are hard. I promise you.
Yeah. It's still work, man. Come on.
Yeah. But so this was the first time really, and sort of a first time that somebody could say, what have you been in? And I could say something, and no matter if they were into games or into whatever, they knew what that was. And so that was kind of a cool feeling. And in so doing, it was the thing that gave me the most, because when Primal came out, that show is about that animation. It's about that character, the storytelling, the music, all of the visual components, auditory components are all there, but it's not about the voice. It's not about, like, people go, oh man, a lot of people would tell me, like, when Primal comes out, man, you're really going to blow up. And the idea of blowing up just makes me want to throw up. Like you were saying, I'm not good at that. Like, it's not what it's about. I would love to be notable in a sense that I get to work more. I mean, that's
Yeah,
like if I
no, that's the part of blowing up is getting more work and getting paid more. Like
yeah,
that's
so that would be cool.
yeah.
But like anybody sort of turning any attention towards me. So with this coming out, this has been the first time, but the lesson that I have learned, especially in this day and age, is that the visibility skyrockets. And it's up to you if you want to push it forward or not.
Yeah, and that's actually something not for nothing, but that's what we're going to address actually in the bonus content
nice.
For Patreon. Is we're going to talk about your reactions to very specific forms of attention.
Oh, great! Yeah,
among
perfect.
other things.
Okay,
that's definitely one of those things that we'll get there. So what I do want to do though, I want to talk about what you have, if you have anything coming up that you can promote.
Yeah,
your world is very
sure.
secretive, but if there's anything that we can steer towards.
Well, I will just say that there's a Hotel Transylvania 4 is coming out. That I played the Gremlins in that, and that was a bit delayed, but it's coming out. It's going to be actually on Prime. This one's going to be on Prime, and that's going to come out pretty soon, in a couple of weeks actually. And so if you're fans, if you've got kids that are fans of that, or you like those yourself, those are really fun. And I don't even remember I know that I did the Gremlins, but I'm not sure what the context was, but so it should be, but it sounds like a fun idea. They've taken it in that direction. And then also Primal, the second season of Primal is going to be coming out. I don't know when. But
I'm not going to dare ask you for any information about that, because I recognize what an NDA is, and I don't want anybody. I don't want anyone getting sued or losing a job because of this podcast.
It's funny because I used to make sort of the mistake of just kind of like, when I would be in the sessions or whatever, at the end, be like, "All right, guys, well, that was really fun, and when's this thing coming out?" And they all kind of like look at each other like, I don't not because the release date is always very secretive. So, but they did say that it would be like coming in 2022.
Great.
So at some point, and also that was another thing, when they released Primal, they released it in kind of a unique way. They did like the first 5 episodes, and then like 5 months later, they did the next 5 of the first season. Whereas this one, they've all been, for the most part, I think they've all been recorded. And so they might release them a little bit more traditionally. I'm not sure though.
It's funny. Masters of the Universe Revelations has a very similar thing, where they did the first parts and the first 5 and then the second 5, which right. By the way, peek behind the curtain, those 5, the part 2 dropped this morning. As of recording, because I know the episode. I know it's November 30th if you're listening to this, but it's November 23rd, right before Thanksgiving, because there was no way I was going to be able to find a guest during the Thanksgiving weekend. It wasn't going to happen. But yeah, so if you haven't seen it yet, the Masters of the Universe Revelation Part 2 is up, and fantastic. And I know you're a He-Man fan, so
yeah, I'm gonna check it out. Yeah, my gosh.
So everybody, if you want to, which of course you do, you're going to need to follow Aaron LaPlante on social media, because he loves attention. Find him at Twitter at Aaron LaPlante with an E at the end, LaPlante 5. So Aaron LaPlante 5 on Twitter, and on Instagram, a slightly harder but much more endearing handle, and that is Dooder3, Dooder3. So find him on Instagram and Twitter. Facebook, maybe don't. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't do Facebook.
Nobody. What are we? Grandparents?
I don't even really do Twitter either. I suppose I should. I mean, we'll talk about that, I guess, in the other episode about like navigating that stuff. Yeah. But yeah, mostly just Instagram.
Yeah. And on my end, of course, you can follow me on social media at Hey There Jeffro across Twitter and Instagram. You feel free to get that. You can also check out my other shows, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman on the Gamefully Unemployed Network, as well as You Don't Even Like Sports and Unpopular Opinion, both on the Unpops Network. You can also check out Mint on Card. It's back. Live comedy is back. And I do a comedy show in a collectible and comic and toy store at Blast from the Past in beautiful Magnolia in Burbank. Our holiday show is going to be December 10th, and we have a murderer's row of lineup there. So you're going to want to come check that out and get some holiday shopping in. If you are a patron, stick around, because we got a little bonus content where we're going to tie Aaron to John Mulaney, and then we're going to talk about fan interactions as well. So if you're not listening to it on the Patreon, then we'll see you in 2 weeks with another great guest. Thank you for listening. I appreciate, adore, and love you. And I hope your holiday season is going fantastic. Aaron, say goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye.
Hey everyone, our artwork is created by Justin T. Brown, who can be found at Artness by Justin Brown on Instagram, as well as artnessbyjustinbrown.com. That dope music you heard is by Troy Nababon, available at Troy Nababon on Instagram, as well as at troynababon.com. Nababon is spelled Nababan, and boy does that shred.